So as an interviewer, I know I'm really not supposed to play favorites. I'm supposed to have the same respect, the same admiration for everybody I bring on. But with apologies to everybody else I interview, this is definitely the favorite person I'm interviewing. This is my wife, Chana, and my co-author of The Cash Machine. This is a book that we wrote very much out of our own financial needs, our own financial places where we stumbled together and the things we had to explore. It's one of the reasons why The Cash Machine turned out to be a love story rather than just a tactical money book. We teach hundreds of financial lessons, but through this fictional love story, but there's a lot in there based upon the actual stuff that happened with us. And so I'm really excited to have Chana here now.
It's such a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
So many people I talk to about money issues, they bring different strategies. Oh, you should do this. This is a good way to invest. This is a bad way to invest. This is a good thing to put your money into. This is a bad thing to put your money into. But you believe in a whole different aspect of that you practice a whole different aspect of that, correct?
Yeah. So what I do as a coach is I don't offer people necessarily financial advice, although I do help people structure their businesses sometimes and make clear business plans. What I help people do most is make sure they have a really solid financial blueprint that's going to help them develop a really solid financial future.
Okay, so blueprint. What is a financial blueprint for anybody who doesn't know?
Okay, so imagine that you want to have a house. So you hire an architect, unless you're really good at that iPad app and you want to design a house yourself. But in either case, you got to make an actual blueprint, right? Which is basically a 2D. It's just a piece of paper with a bunch of lines on it. And if you know how to read blueprints, you can see all those lines and say, oh, this is going to be a room, and here's going to be a window, and there's going to be a porch, and oh, here we're going to have like this kind of a setup and a bathroom, and all of those things you can see just from a bunch of lines on a piece of paper. You can imagine the house actually coming into existence.
Right.
Okay, so the same thing is true when it comes to your blueprint around all these different aspects of your life. You have your relationship blueprint, you have your God blueprint, you have your career blueprint, but you also have a financial blueprint, which is made up of all of the beliefs you have around money. So what do you think about money? What do you believe about wealth? What do you believe about wealthy people, or your ability to make money, or how much money you believe that you deserve? All of that is in your financial blueprint. And if I see your blueprint, I can already predict what your sort of financial home is going to look like. Right. And the other way is also true, right? So if I see someone who every single month is struggling to make ends meet, constantly struggling to make ends meet, I can take certain guesses about what beliefs they have around money. And so I help people kind of recalibrate that whole thing so they're not stuck. All the stuff that you're teaching them and in this entire program that people are learning, if they have beliefs about money that are really destructive, they'll find a way to mess every single one of those tools up. So they're not useful enough unless the foundation is good.
Can we make this more concrete? Can you give me an example of like a really horrible money belief and the destructive power it can have? Like maybe a real example, maybe somebody you've actually worked with in the past?
Yes, I actually have a really good example of somebody we worked on together.
Hope it's
right?
not me.
Well, yeah, you are one of the people we worked on together, but we're not going to focus on us right now. But there was this young guy who we knew who was actually really talented. He still is really, really talented at what he does, having the ability to sit down with CEOs and government officials and create really fantastic contracts for himself. And yet he never had enough month at the end of his money, right? So he was like always trying to make ends meet and couldn't figure out how to make more. And he walked into our kitchen and you said, asking you for business advice. And you said, no. First, we need to know what your beliefs are around money. And do you remember what you asked him?
I told him to fill in the blank.
Yeah. And Dave said, rich people are. And this guy responded, greedy. And then he said, money is. And the guy said, the root of all evil. And it was like, oh my gosh. Well, if that's what he believes, then he's going to do everything in his power to make sure that he doesn't become wealthy. And what's been really fascinating is literally it took this guy 5 years to be willing to actually take a look at his blueprint and put question marks all over it. And recently we got a phone call from him and he said, I finally figured it out. I finally got it. If I become wealthy, that doesn't mean I have to become like my dad. I can be a different kind of person. And that was like huge. That just changed absolutely everything. And now he's building wealth and building a solid future for himself and for his family. So that's like a really simple, perfect example. But it's something I deal with all the time with people.
Okay, rich people are greedy. Money is the root of all evil. Those are two clearly fairly destructive beliefs. What are some other beliefs that commonly come up in your practice that really get in people's way around money?
So something that a lot of people struggle with, and I'd be curious to know if you there in the audience are also struggling with this, that if I make a lot of money, I won't know what to do with it.
And that was a big one.
That was a big one for yeah, exactly.
Big one for me.
We didn't know what to do with extra money, and we'd often make stupid mistakes with it, or we felt like we weren't allowed to have it and we had to give it away. So we gave it away to lots and lots of people who weren't us. And what weren't our future or our future children or our future grandchildren. It was like we didn't think in that way because we were uncomfortable with having more. What's another belief that people struggle with? It's hard to make money.
Right. A lot of people believe that.
And another one is that the only way to create financial stability is through a steady paycheck. And that one is particularly problematic in our generation, even less than our generation, the generation, Zers or whatever it is, like the people who are coming out of college right now. It's really difficult if you're coming out of college right now to get a job that's going to give you a steady paycheck for the next 40 years and set you up with a retirement account until you're 120. Like that picture that was, existed in the 50s and 60s and even into the 70s is like totally defunct nowadays. So the idea of depending on a steady paycheck becomes really problematic when it's really easy for us in our business. We hire people from Eastern Europe and India and Asia and South America, and it's difficult to compete in that kind of environment and live on, a North American standard, for example.
Absolutely. One of the things that we found difficult sometimes is we see that the parents, very often the fathers who we meet, are encouraging people to go the same path that they went. They worked for them. And they're in their 50s and they're advising somebody in their teens or 20s on, well, this is what you have to do to be successful. And they're often missing that the world is shifting somewhat.
It's shifting a ton. And one of the things that's really helpful is in your financial blueprint is if you see your financial your financial picture as being 100% your responsibility as opposed to expecting society or corporations or government to take care of you. And a lot of people are walking around waiting for other people to take care of them as opposed to seeing that they have to be the masters of their own future.
I think degrees are one of the biggest things we see. We see a lot of young people getting tremendously into debt, even though they're studying something that doesn't directly lead to a clear field, a clear career, a clear dream of theirs necessarily, but they're taking on all of this financial debt out of some belief that this is how you go and become financially stable.
Exactly. That if I don't follow, that's another belief. If I don't follow the plan that my parents tell me to, I'm destined for financial failure. And we actually know a young man who literally dropped out of college and is now making more money than his peers in sales. And he was too scared to drop out of college because he was getting so much negative pushback from his parents. But once he did, he freed up all of his time to really start figuring out what are his skills and what does he want to do with his future. And building real skills is something anybody can do these days, even, during Corona, even during a lockdown, even if you're living, when we spent a month in Ecuador, partly to research the book and partly, let's be honest, to have a really good time. So one of the things that we notice is the cost of living there is so cheap and online education is so widely available and often free that you can really gain very marketable skills while living super, super cheaply and build so many real assets. I get people applying for jobs. I mean, you do too, but recently I was looking for an assistant and I got somewhere between 30 and 50 resumes. And I have to say, most of them were really unimpressive. And the fact that the person had gone to college didn't matter all that much. I really wanted to know what their actual marketable skills were. What could they actually do? Could they write? Could they communicate? And oftentimes they couldn't. That was really challenging.
Okay, so how do we actually work on somebody's financial blueprint? Like somebody comes in and they say, yes, I believe that money is the root of all evil. Do you say, no, you fool! You're going to destroy yourself! This is idiotic! What are you doing? Get out of here! Like, how do we do that? Like, you can't berate the beliefs out of somebody, I assume. What do you do in order to help somebody shift their beliefs?
You can't shock your guests into cracking up so hard. They can't answer your questions. So first of all, I'm a woman. I don't yell. What I do instead is offer layers of guilt, right?
That's what I do. Why she's the coach and I'm not.
Okay, no, in all honesty, what I do is create a space for the person to, first of all, identify the beliefs getting in their way. Like if you come in, you often don't even notice that belief is there. So for example, this guy who came into our kitchen and you said rich people are, and he said greedy. It's not like he's walking around consciously understanding that he's holding on to rich people are greedy. It's sitting there in the subconscious. But the beliefs in our subconscious are driving our behavior. So the first thing we do is just identify what those beliefs are. And the next thing we do is create a space to question those beliefs. So for example, if you come in with rich people are greedy. So then I would ask you, is it true? Are rich people greedy?
Okay, so this guy would have said, yes, obviously they are.
Yeah.
So what do you do then?
Okay. And so then I engage oftentimes in a process of inquiry called the work of Byron Katie. That's a tool for inquiry I like very much. I've added a whole bunch of other inquiry tools around it, some of which I've created, some of which I've gleaned.
And this is most of them are taught in Hannah's book, Hold That Thought, which I highly recommend for people who want to work on their belief systems.
And you're welcome to get a free download of that book. The notes will have like all of those download links and everything. So in the meantime, so this guy comes in, right? He's believing that rich people are greedy. So we engage in this process of questioning, of helping him understand what does this belief actually do to him? And he can see, wow, what happens in his physiology when he believes rich people are greedy? And I want you to try this for size. Close your eyes for a moment and just put yourself in a situation where you're trying to engage in a work project or maybe doing your taxes or looking at your bank statement, and you're believing the thought that rich people are greedy. So Dave, be my guinea pig. What comes up for you when you're believing that thought?
Oh, just like this kind of disgust. I don't want to do anything. I don't want to help people. I don't want to be doing anything that is going to help support this greed from these rich people.
And what comes up in your body or in your emotions when you're believing that thought?
Like tension.
Okay,
Yeah.
Great. So I personally don't want to be a disgusted, tense person. I want to be a happy person. And if only for that reason, that's reason enough not to believe such a thought, because it just sucks to be disgusted and unhappy and tense, okay? But then there's this other level where Dave said, wow, he doesn't want to help anyone. He doesn't want to do anything. So much of what Dave and I do is we try to serve people through our books, through our coaching, through the classes that we teach. And if we don't teach those things and write those things, and we can't serve people. So we're actually like depriving people of really valuable knowledge and information and resources because we're just feeling too tight. And that just sucks, right? So Byron Katie introduced this concept called a turnaround, which is when you take the opposite of the statement. And oftentimes the opposites of those statements that make you feel yucky are not only more true, they actually bring so much more vitality into your life, which is why I call myself a vitality coach. Okay, so I want you to tell me, Dave, what's an opposite of rich people are greedy?
Rich people are not greedy.
Great. So in order for you to actually take this belief seriously, you're going to have to give it some evidence. So you might have noticed that when you were believing that rich people are greedy, you had this whole laundry list of evidence that came up. Were you picturing things? Were you picturing examples of that?
Yeah.
Can you give us an example of something you pictured when you believed that thought?
Picture kind of like, the banker type sitting there manipulating people, trying to figure out how he could screw people out of their money. The old the classic
Scrooge kind of.
Scrooge, yeah, type guy.
Okay, great. So when we believe something, we tend to stack up all sorts of evidence as though we're in a courtroom. And what we do is we only stack up the evidence that supports our side of the equation, but
Right.
we're not willing to look at everything else. And if we want to be real, honest, and genuine human beings, we have to be willing to look at all evidence and not only use confirmation bias to support this one thing that we believe. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring up evidence to bolster this alternative perspective that rich people are not greedy. So Dave, give us some examples from your personal life or things that you've seen of how it's true that rich people are not greedy.
Well, going back to this scenario where we had this guy standing in our kitchen, I was actually doing dishes and talking to him. When we hit that one thing that we had, it was a time that a lot of people were struggling financially in the neighborhood we lived in. And this guy lived in the same neighborhood we did at the time. And there were a couple very wealthy individuals in the neighborhood who I happen to know were helping all of these families have enough food to get through the week, have enough money to pay their rent or mortgage. And I saw that, and this guy knew who these families were. And we talked about this, like, do you look at these people as being greedy? And the guy had to stop and think for a second, like, well, no, actually, they're doing tremendous amounts of charity through the neighborhood. They're helping so many people out. And so when we put like a real example, he had a real example in his mind that he wanted to stay away from. But when we put other real examples in front of him, he started seeing that actually being wealthy allowed people to be more generous, not more greedy. And that was a big shift.
Well, also, it's interesting because just the example of you standing in the kitchen willing to give this guy your time.
Right.
You had this extra time as a product of you creating financial independence through your business.
I was also doing dishes at the time, so it wasn't really extra time.
But you've met with people even when you're not doing dishes to share with them about everything that we've learned about money. So yeah. that kind of also works. So give me one more example of an opposite of rich people are greedy.
Poor people are greedy.
Poor people are greedy. Great. So this is something I really, really recommend you do with every single belief that you have. That's what I call a double bind, where you put as polar opposites two things that you actually want. So what do I mean by that? Rich people are greedy. So you're equating rich people with greed. The two things that you want is you really want wealth and you also want generosity. Okay. So you want to be this generous, wealthy person, but you've made them as if they're polar opposites, that they can't coexist. And you've done that in your mind by gluing two concepts together that don't necessarily belong together. And part of how you unravel that is you don't just look at rich people, you look at all people. And if you notice that all people have the capacity to be greedy, then greed doesn't belong to rich people, it just belongs to people. Right? And it helps to break that belief down and break down the neural web you've created around it in your mind. So fantastic. Give me an example of how poor people are greedy.
It was funny. Just yesterday, Han and I were walking. There's like a free book exchange that we walk to sometimes. And I picked up this book. It was The Dilbert Principle by Scott Adams. Had all this Dilbert business ideas that I was looking at. I just paged through it and I was going to take it and I'm like, it was a bit too sarcastic for me. But one thing it was pointing out was that if you have a really lousy product, you want to have very aggressive sales thresholds, so that your salespeople have to hit. That will then persuade them to be totally unethical in their sales processes and go out and get you lots of sales. And it won't matter that you have a really bad product. So what was it basically pointing out? It's pointing out that when people are stressed financially, they're much more likely to compromise themselves. People are much more likely to, if a rich person has all kinds of money, well, they can be generous with it. But if a poor person is really stressed about each dollar, they might not help others. They might maybe be more likely to steal or to cheat or to do other things or to push too hard in a sales thing because they're feeling desperate. Whenever we're desperate, we tend to be living on a lower plane a lot of the time. So maybe if somebody is really feeling desperate around money, maybe they will compromise themselves around money more than somebody who's not feeling desperate.
The other thing you could do is just look at who are the people who go to jail for theft. and robbery, right? They're usually not wealthy people. And not only that, it's so common that it's not wealthy people that every once in a while there's a wealthy person who gets caught, doing some unethical stealing kind of behavior, and it makes the news and it becomes this big deal. And because it makes the news, it can leave an imprint in people's mind that wealthy people are greedy. But the imprint that it should leave is actually that it's unusual for wealthy people to be greedy.
Because it's newsworthy.
Yeah,
right.
Because it's newsworthy. Yeah. So great. So those are some examples of how you can shift things around. So really what you want to do is go through a process, and that's something you can learn how to do in my book, is go through a process of identifying the beliefs that are blocking you from building wealth in your life and from holding on to the cash that you have and from being generous with it. And then questioning those beliefs and helping to develop beliefs that are more beneficial. But the most important thing is once you do question your beliefs and create good ones, take action right away. So Dave, what's a piece of action that you can take on these new beliefs from poor people are greedy and wealthy people are not greedy?
So I just want to be clear, we're not painting this picture. I'm not trying to say that I want this new belief that poor people are greedy and wealthy people are not. It's this double bind issue that you're pointing out. We're saying that really there are people who are greedy and there are people who are wealthy. And there's going to be some correlation between then there are going to be greedy wealthy people, there's going to be greedy poor people, there's going to be non-greedy wealthy people, there's going to be non-greedy poor people. Greedy is just something that each person has to kind of struggle with their own greed, just like they have to struggle with all of their character traits.
Exactly.
And so you'll sometimes find greed in wealthy people, and you'll sometimes find it with poor people, but it doesn't mean that if I personally become wealthy, then I'm going to develop this negative character trait of greed. And I think that's really what I want to be working on, to understand that. It's like, no, I have the choice of the character traits I develop. And maybe if I go into it with the right mentality, then having a lot of wealth can actually make me less greedy if I'm doing the right work on myself to make myself more generous and to have healthier sets of beliefs around money. Is that right?
Yeah. So like one action step that you can do is to already see yourself being wealthy and simultaneously generous with your money. And the best way to practice doing that is something that comes up in the cash machine, which is from day one, set yourself up towards charitable giving, not waiting until you're wealthy, doing it now. So a lot of people say, oh, I don't have enough money to give to charity, but there are people whose religious foundation includes tithing, and no matter how little they make, they always give 10% away. As soon as money comes in the door, they give 10% away and they get habituated to it. So creating rituals like that are really beautiful. There's a pastor in California, his name is Rick Warren, and he and his wife decided when they got married that they were going to add 1% each year to how much they were going to give. Eventually, he wrote this book, A Purpose-Driven Life, that made him so incredibly wealthy that now they give 90% of what they make. But it was really interesting, every year of their marriage, they added another percentage. So it was 11 and 12 and 13, so that they were designing their lives to build towards more generosity rather than staying stagnant or engaging in less.
Right. I've heard it said somebody who won't give 10 cents on a dollar won't give 100,000 out of a million. We tend to believe that when I have a lot, I'll give a lot, but really giving is like a muscle, and we have to start that even when we have very little. Be generous. You want to see yourself as generous? Be generous. So I want to talk about how somebody can identify more of these beliefs that might be getting in their way. This one, rich people are greedy, might not affect them, but other beliefs might. So how can they figure out what beliefs are blocking them?
So one of the easiest ways is by filling out the Mason's Magical Money Magnet Survey, right? This is a list of statements around wealth and money and work that we've developed. And you can access that. You're probably going to put like links or something to that, correct?
Yeah, I'll put a link to the Mason's Magical Money Magnet.
So that's one thing you can do. The other thing you can do is you can fill in the blank thought bank building exercises. So a thought bank is literally just a list of thoughts that you have around a certain topic. And you can do money is blank, wealthy people are blank, and complete those statements in as many ways as you can. And another thing that you can do is you can set yourself up for what I call monsters under the bed. Okay, so you close your eyes and you picture yourself being wealthy, right? That you have some image of yourself really having financial independence, and a solid financial future. And then ask yourself, what are you afraid would happen if you got there? That's your monsters under the bed. What are you afraid would happen if you got there? And an obstacle course question, all of these are in my book. An obstacle course question would be, why don't you believe that you can get there? What beliefs are getting in your way from you actually achieving that? So it might be, I don't have self-control, I don't have self-discipline, I'm not smart enough to achieve such a goal, something like that. And when you write all of those thoughts down, then you know exactly what you have to work with.
Okay, awesome. And if somebody goes through the survey, they find their beliefs and they want to actually get rid of them. I know people often like go to therapy for like decades. Like, how long does it take? If you're working one-on-one with somebody, how long does it take for someone to really significantly shift their blueprint?
So it really depends. I've had sessions where I had this one session with actually someone who is also a coach, and she was dealing with all sorts of work stress. And after 10 minutes, she was done. But
she
usually
switched her whole blueprint in 10 minutes?
She switched her whole blueprint in 10 minutes because it was almost like a tornado. And once we got to the eye of the tornado and created a shift there, it just had this domino effect on everything else. But usually I work with people for 3 months on, their major goals, clarifying their goals and getting through all the blocks getting in their way. And what I expect to happen is for there to be, in every 1 hour session, at least 2 major aha moments. And then I give people homework in between sessions for them to continuously do this work, and they come back and tell me about the aha moments they had in between. And when you have a shift in one belief, it has these ripple effects on everything else in your life. And usually we work on multiple beliefs in every session. So it's pretty powerful stuff.
Okay, awesome. So definitely recommend checking out Chana's stuff. You can download a free copy of her book. We'll have a link to that. Hold that thought. Take the Mason's Magical Money Magnet to find out which particular money beliefs are getting in your way. And if you want to book a session to work with Chana on them, you don't necessarily have to commit to 3 months up front. If you just want to work on your money beliefs, we've seen people have huge turnarounds, huge breakthroughs, and just a single session. And if you want to work on like your whole life and all of these things, then yeah, definitely work with Chana for a few months. And thank you so much, Chana, for coming up.
It's a pleasure being here. Take care, everybody.